All right, everybody, welcome back. This is the end of the world with Michael and Stu.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Stu. And today we are talking about one of the greatest of all films. That's right. It's 2005's The War of the Worlds, or just War of the Worlds, starring the inimitable and brilliant Tom Cruise and directed by the unstoppable and masterful Steven Spielberg.
And Dakota Fanning's in it.
As a child, yes.
Yes, that's right.
One of those rare child actors who has gone on to have a later life career.
Who was not, did not have her career cut short by this monstrosity.
Yeah, not my favorite film, to say the least. But, good news, it does have Morgan Freeman as narrator. So
thank God. Where would it be without it?
But before we get into all of that, some great news just dropped last night, I believe it was.
Yeah, finalized today, I think.
The outgoing president, Joseph Robinette Biden, has pardoned his son, Hunter, for all crimes committed between 2010 and today, I think. It was a sweeping move on the part of President Biden, drawing a lot of negative feedback, I would say.
Yeah, how do you feel about it?
Well,
let's separate it for a second. Let's talk about the move as a father pardoning the son first. And then let's talk a little bit about how do you feel about it strategically going forward, which obviously he doesn't have much
I'm not a father.
Gas left in the tank, but
I'm not a father. But were I to be a father, I think it's pretty understandable. I was asking my students about this, and they were like, "Yeah, I'd pardon my kid." And I was like, "Yeah." Also, I think there is something to the idea that Hunter Biden's been, the attention paid to his crimes has been a bit more intense than it would have been if his dad were not the president. And
this is the kind of thing I think I meant by sort of separating the two things, because I do think that unlike many of Trump's crying foul, that the Hunter thing does have some legs in terms of Biden's outlook, right? In terms of the severity of the infraction, what seems to usually take place in these cases. And then, of course, the plea deal that I think nobody would really argue that did get politicized, right? In terms of helping it to unravel.
You mean that it didn't get politicized?
No, I'm saying that when the plea deal came out, there was pressure from Republicans.
Right. It was politicized. Yeah.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think in that sense, it's understandable, but I think it's while we have been covering the various calamities that are unfolding in the transition to a Trump presidency, this just feels like another really bad precedent. In fact, to set any precedent, it's been a common sort of meme sort of idea, I guess, that while all of these devastating Supreme Court rulings came down that made everyone doubly frightened of a Trump presidency, sort of the immunity, the above the law, there was kind of this idea of well, now that he's lost, or now that he's not running, maybe Biden can do some cool shit on the way out the door, since he can't be prosecuted. And it seems that what he decided to do was, get the Ukraine war into overdrive and pardon his son.
And get one last $700 billion to Israel for weapons.
But that tricky minimum wage just can't be shifted.
Nope.
But strategically, the language, I think, that Biden uses, while grounded, like I said, in something approaching understandable reality, creates a very fertile ground, I think, for Trump, right? Given his exact type of fabrication or hyperbole plays exactly into the language of Biden's statement. I don't know if you read it, but
I looked at it a
obviously
little bit.
it's far calmer than the way Trump would have done a similar thing. But basically, the argument being that um, you can excuse away behavior if the response to that behavior can be described as political witch hunty in nature, right? And it kind of opens up the not that he needed the invitation,
The
but
Pandora's box, if you will.
yes. And that's where I ultimately come down on the Biden thing, I think, is that like the people who are criticizing him because of what it might allow Trump to do are ignoring the fact that Trump would have done all of this anyway
Yeah,
without.
and already has pardoned every single member of his previous administration who
Right.
was under fire, Steve Bannon, various other, Michael
Yeah.
Flynn. Yeah, so
But it sort of breaks down pretty perfectly the distinction between the two parties at this moment, right? I
yeah,
heard somebody, I forget which podcast I was listening to, but described him, not an original idea, but that he's honestly dishonest, Trump, right? And the Democrats' big disadvantage is that they feign morality where
yeah,
Trump doesn't. And he, for Biden to stake a large part of his whole shtick, I guess, on not pardoning Hunter, right? To allow due process because it's so important for our norms to be maintained. To then flip on that in the final hours of his presidency just seems like a pretty bleak turn of events once again.
bleak, but as you say, appropriate, fitting,
Yeah,
apt.
yeah, that's right.
Hail Atlantis. Anyway, the yeah, it's not looking good. I mean, the Trump statement today about what will happen if the hostages aren't released is, I'm like, oh right, this like
Yep.
really back into the fray. But before we ponder the end of that world, our sanity, perhaps, let's lose our sanity in another way, in stupidity of this adaptation of The War of the Worlds, which I did not see until last week when we decided that we would cover it this week. I missed it. It was one of the highest grossing films of 2005. I think it made $800 million globally. And yet
I also have never seen it until this week.
in the 19 years since it was released, somehow like just never been in a room where it was playing. I'd never seen a minute of it. And I think after watching it, I understand why. Because
yeah, we'll look back on those 19 years quite fondly, I think.
That was like the sort of pre-2016 of our psyches, We never knew how good we had it. Is this the first Spielberg film that we've covered?
I think so. Yeah.
Is it time for me to tell my run-in with Spielberg anecdote?
Yeah. Let's start there.
All right. So this is probably 10 or 12 years ago. I was on my way to a therapy appointment. I was walking across Midtown Manhattan. I used to teach at John Jay College on the west side, 59th Street. And my therapist's office was at Fifth Avenue and 59th Street. So after my class, I would just walk all the way across town. And one day I was doing this, and as I was coming into the sort of Central Park South area, I noticed a kid walking with like a big, what looked to be a painting under his arm. It was like a big, almost like a canvas or something. And I thought to myself, oh, isn't that inspiring? There are still children in the world out there making art. That's great. And I thought, the Art Students League is around the corner. I bet he's going to a painting class, and how industrious. He's brought his own canvas. Oh, how wrong I was. So a little while later, I come up to, I think it's the Four Seasons Hotel. It's one of those big, fancy hotels right on the corner of 6th Avenue and 59th Street, right at the bottom of the park. And all of a sudden, I walk by the side entrance and the door swings open right in front of me. And before I have a chance to think, Steven Spielberg and I believe his wife are ushered past me like 3 feet away by a security guard. And just as they're going by, I hear this horrifying shriek from the distance saying, Mr. Spielberg, Mr. Spielberg. And I look over, and to my utter dismay, it is the kid with the canvas, which I had just, made this fantastical imagination of his life,
romanticization,
romantic vision of him. And he's turned the canvas around, and to my horror, it is like the most horrible looking fan like tribute collage whereby he has like cut out from magazines like images of like ET, Minority Report,
Right.
just Jurassic Park, just all the big, and he's
Of
like,
course.
come on, and almost like with a child. This kid's probably 20 years old, with the like handwriting of a child, almost as if it were written in crayon. Was like Jurassic Park, like I mean, I almost think that there was like a mistake. I mean, funny like there had been a Titanic in addition to all, it's just like
Right.
and all right. So then what happens is I think, oh my God, this is horrible. I look over and I see the security guard like swing into position as Spielberg and his wife are getting into the back of like a limo that's like a SUV limo. And the security guard's like, hey, kid, Mr. Spielberg is not signing anything today. And the kid said the words that have stuck with me, that have kept me awake, tossing and turning in my nightmares all of these 10 years later. He said, that's okay. I just wanted to thank him for signing yesterday.
Oh my God.
Now, maybe it was like...
so he would come back?
Yeah. He returned to the scene of his previous stalking. And the fact
Perhaps
that
making the collage in the night between.
No. The Spielberg had signed the collage.
He was bringing back the same collage for a second run.
To just thank him for signing it the day before. And like, what's kept me awake, literally just unable to sleep for the past decade, is just what did the kid think was going to happen when? Now, first of all, Central Park area, not so far from the Dakota Apartments, where a famous stalking murder may have happened.
Yes,
indeed. Mr. Lennon was killed by a fan for whom he signed an autograph earlier the day. That's in the back of my mind. But also it's like, does the kid think Spielberg's going to look at the collage and be like, wow, Jimmy, over at Amblin Entertainment, we actually have a position that based on this, you would be perfect. Right. We're gonna get you on a plane.
Right. Like on the collage, like his treatment is attached in the corner.
Well, no, just like he's going to be their graphic guy. He's going to be their logo guy from now on. All right, or is it something even more like mystical? Like, does he believe that just by being near Spielberg, by being in his presence for a second time, never mind the first time,
right,
that he'll just some of that Spielberg fairy dust will like shoulder
but
and.
I think for me, the takeaway, the real thing that would sort of, I guess, keep me up at night is just why bring the collage back?
Why?
Right? Like if you're that sort of fanboying and fucked up and obsessive, fine. You go, you say, hey, I just wanted to thank you again. You want to see him again. He's there. You want to recreate some semblance of the magic of that moment that you had just experienced. But to carry the collage one more time,
well, it's like a serial killer revisiting.
Yes, eliminates any possibility. Yes, eliminates any possibility of like a cordial interaction, right? Like, God knows that Spielberg himself probably hasn't slept since, just because he had to sign it the very next day. But like, you would think that if he had it signed, then he came back and kind of acted like, oh, what are the chances?
What are the chances that I'm stalking you outside your hotel?
So nice to see you again. Hey, by the way, thanks for signing my collage.
Yeah.
But no, he had to go all in. To think that Steven would definitely want to see the collage again. Was the collage interesting or just
no? It was the worst thing I've ever seen. And I mean, having just imagined he was like a a young Rembrandt or something
Right.
to then be
A dandy.
so thoroughly disabused of my, oh my God, he's not
Right.
an A, he's a monster.
Yes, well,
Yeah.
I think we're in store for that. Anytime you think the culture might be saved, you get a nice stark reminder like that.
No, it's amazing. I think about that story. Literally, I think about it all the time. It comes up all the time. Probably my
Including
biggest.
this week, I assume.
Well, it's yeah. I thought of it, of course, but it's my biggest celeb run-in. Spielberg. I don't think I've ever like had a random run-in. I've seen a couple. I saw Obama speak once. He's a little more famous, but Spielberg. That's A tier.
I saw Obama speak, and Dave Matthews opened for him.
Wow. When I saw
Played one song, "Mercy."
weird, strange.
Yeah. Well, this was during the Mitt Romney 2012 election, and he was closing out his campaign in Denver. I did this crazy drive from Denver to Salt Lake to see
Oh yeah.
Obama and then the closing ceremonies of the beleaguered Romney campaign. And
Oh
he had
man.
one song, and he chose "Mercy," and it crushed. People loved it.
That's good. That's good. When I saw him in '07, it was Cornell West. This is part of
Oh, really?
their very public falling out.
Yes. Wow.
And then a surprise at the Apollo Theater, and a surprise Chris Rock emerged as the like second introducer.
Oh, really?
So it was a real like ooh.
Back when celebrity endorsements worked.
Back when they meant something, Michael.
Yeah. I'm getting out there for Dave Matthews. I saw "Mercy" in Denver, and I'm going to vote.
Well, we've been avoiding the film for a bit now because it's a bad film. And, just going over it, as I said, there's this sort of August Morgan Freeman narration. He's just a free narrator. He's not in the movie at all, except to open and close it. Very weird, very artificial gesture. The sort of main plot elements of this are taken directly from the novel. And we'll talk about the source material a little bit in a few minutes. But
sure.
Basically, Tom Cruise is some kind of dock worker. He's a longshoreman, a crane operator. He's the best. We learned quickly he's the best crane operator. Never comes back. I was
sort of irredeemable guy.
Yeah, he seems like a scoundrel, sort of rapscallion. He's divorced.
You'll never guess he's divorced, and you'll never guess he has kids.
2 kids with whom he has a great relationship. Psych. No, there's a lot of tension between him and his kids.
This is one of the differences, because there are a lot of movies in this vein that tend to start with our hero with a broken family to provide the very basic B story of, while navigating the collapse of civilization, one also must put their family back together. And it's interesting because, you think of like 2012, right? Cusack. There's always something endearing about the hero. Like the marriage fell apart. With Dustin Hoffman's another example. There's no kids in that one, but this idea that there's something there. And the difference here is that Cruise, we'll talk about it a bit more as we get into the movie, but even from the beginning of the movie, is just a miserable piece of shit who basically, it feels like he actually kind of hates his kids too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. He's consistently a dick to his children.
And the wife feels this need to like literally carry the kids' luggage up the stairs out of fear that it won't get put in the right place.
Right. And in his house, there's like a massive truck engine that he's just refurbished.
Yeah. He's done absolutely nothing to prepare for the children coming. Like, he can't even fake it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's very, very bizarre. It's a very, very bizarre choice that when I first started watching the movie, I figured would get remedied. And
but it
doesn't really.
Yeah. Yeah. It's different than the book, in which the protagonist has a wife, but I don't believe he has any children. And so this is added for this version. I haven't. Yeah. There've been other film versions. Perhaps they have something like this in them as well, but I don't know. In any case, the movie moves pretty quickly. I mean, the kids arrive, and then that night there's weird power. We've been getting the classic news reports of unexplained
Hmm.
lightning in Ukraine, blah 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 blah. Right? Like, I mean, I feel like this is a real hallmark of the pod at this point. Is just these like background information dumps via fake news reports. This is
Right, right.
hallmark of the apocalyptic movie genre.
Well, you have to save as much time as you can for the completely uninspiring family narrative.
That's right. And there are a bunch of lightning strikes start in Bayonne, where they are located, home of George R. R. Martin, another
Oh, really?
favorite of the pod. I believe that's where he grew up. And there's ominous clouds. He hates the son. The son, Robbie, is a teen. He's probably 16, 17. The daughter is Rachel, who is 10, maybe 8.
Yeah.
Hard to say for sure, but a
They
young,
play him and the son play catch outside, and it's very aggressive. It's mean. They're both mean.
he throws the ball through
Uh,
the window because he's trying
yeah.
to hurt the son by throwing it so
Hmm.
hard. The son wisely doesn't try and catch it. Yeah, it's very bad. And it also doesn't feel the age gap between the kids feels like
It suggests that they were married for quite a long time,
then
despite
nothing
their
else in the
clear
film.
incompatibility.
Later,
Yeah.
it's revealed he's like unaware that the daughter has a childhood peanut allergy. Which,
Yes.
if you know one thing about your kid as a
Yeah.
parent, it's that if they eat peanuts, they will die. Right? Like that's
And also, there's a sequence a bit later in the film where they get brief refuge, and he has no food because he's a total deadbeat, and he blames his son for not packing correctly in this incredibly panicked moment.
when
And
they
the
play.
son's like, "That's all you had was sauces," and he pulls out bread and peanut butter, and the daughter's like, "I have a peanut butter allergy or peanut allergy," and
Right.
he's like. And the funny thing is that when he
Like
finds
since
that out,
when?
he doesn't even like assess the fact that when people have peanut allergies, it's like you really gotta get the peanuts away.
Yeah.
Instead, he just like keeps the peanut butter around, brags to the kid that he's gonna eat and enjoy the peanut butter with the son. Oh, fine. Well, we'll just be here eating our peanut butter sandwiches.
it's very it's very it's very bad. Now, almost immediately the next morning, after these lightning strikes, who should appear but the dreaded War of the Worlds staple villain, the tripods.
Mm-hmm.
These three-legged robots that have apparently been buried under our land around the world, perhaps for centuries. It's
Yep.
unclear. They've been there for a long time. And these lightning strikes have transported their drivers down to them from on high, from the
Mm-hmm.
presumably the alien mothership. In other versions, the creatures are specifically Martian. In this one, we don't have a proper idea of where they come from,
No.
but the basic idea is that they're resource starved and they want to drain Earth for everything it's worth.
Right. But of course, we don't know that at first. But what happens is out in the streets, the ground starts splitting, buildings start collapsing, and this is just another great example where all of this happens very slowly. This takes a while, and people are doing the
Right.
classic. The cops are somehow still in charge, even though this completely unprecedented, inconceivable moment is happening.
We love
The
order.
cops are like, move back, like they're going to figure out what to do. Meanwhile, this is all unfolding, buildings are collapsing, and he doesn't for 1 second consider going back to his kids.
Right.
He just sits there to establish, I guess, that he's the lead character in the movie.
Yep.
And he just kind of stares at the situation. Um, we find out that like a bunch of vehicles are not working.
There's been some kind
Right.
of EMP that has killed a lot
Yeah.
of electronics.
Right.
And he
But
gives
he's had this one idea to fix this one van,
to which he tells
which of
his
course
buddy
becomes the
Manny,
van.
and the van is fixed by Manny, the mechanic. But the tripods immediately they're hovering and menacingly, and they start lasering everyone. People are just dying. A few
Right.
laser blasts come pretty close to Tom Cruise. Shockingly, he evades them.
It is okay. Yep.
And I think some of the practical effects of like the street cracking and all that, it looks good. But I feel like this movie just really lacks Spielberg's touch somehow, right? Like maybe
It feels like he's really mailing it in.
it feels
Yeah.
phoned in. Like there's just not the tripods look cool, I guess, but the
Eh.
visual effects aren't that well integrated. It's kind of a disappointment. Eventually, he gets the van that he's somehow fixed
Well,
by.
yeah, he gets the van, and there's this moment where
He's like,
every,
Manny, get in the van.
this is
We're gonna
it's
die.
inexplicable, right? All of this stuff has happened in the vicinity of the van,
Yep.
right? And he's gotten to the van, and somehow Manny is just really committed on having a normal work day, and gets very confused about the idea that
And
Tom
also
Cruise
that
is
he's going to
trying.
steal a van that's not his, really
That's not his.
troubled van.
But doubly strange is that Tom Cruise, through the whole beginning of this movie, right up until essentially the end of Act One, when they sort of get the van, he just refuses to explain anything to anyone. And I still can't figure out why. Like, he goes back home, he won't tell the kids anything about what is happening. So they don't even know to react with urgency. Then he goes to the van and he's like praying that his solution to fix the van worked. I guess because it came after the EMP. I don't know. But he sees this one van that can get them out of trouble. And he, on the one hand, is making this earnest effort to save his friend.
Yep.
On the other hand, won't explain what is happening all around. And then, of course, like, he finally has to give up on Manny, so he drives away. And the second he drives away, the
Manny
guy is
is like,
murked.
yeah, he's laced. He's blasted.
And you're just sitting there like, why can't you just tell Manny what the fuck is going on? Why was it all shrouded? Do you have any idea why he would shroud it in mystery? Was it to protect the innocence of his children? I mean, like, what?
I don't really understand it either. It seems like a script choice that doesn't bear fruit.
Sure.
There's no explanation for it. So they get away. The aliens are just blasting everyone. They escape to the wife's house, but of course, the wife and her new husband, Sam, have gone off to Boston to visit her parents who are ill or whatever. And they've dropped the kids off. And the kids don't know this for some reason, though. They get to the house and they're like, Mom. And mom's not there. And he's like, oh, right, they're in Boston.
Yeah.
And the kids are
Even
like,
though it was explained to all of them.
yeah, again, it's just like, what are we doing here? They go to sleep in the basement only to find their sleep is interrupted by horrible sounds of what else? A plane crashing in their neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And they wake up. The plane is very intact for a 747 that's fallen out of the sky. Now, one of the obvious subtexts of this movie is September 11th, right? I mean, it's set in New York or New York area. There is literally a plane crash. Like, there are these destructive, inexplicable, several times as they're fleeing, the son asks, is it the terrorists? Is it the terrorists? And he says, I think they're from somewhere else. And the one chuckle I got is the son goes, oh, like Europe? And he says, no, not Europe. Right. So clearly that's kind of what they're working with, right? They're trying to evoke the panic reaction to 9/11,
Right.
that weird neither region between when the towers were struck and when the towers fell.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of like, was this an accident? What's going on? Oh my God, it's not an accident. Oh my, it's a disaster. Oh, the towers are falling. Right. Like, it's all of that energy kind of crammed into this one alien, this one rehashed alien story.
Right.
Is like it's one of the alien stories. Like, this is one of the first alien invasion novels from the 1890s. And it obviously has a famous place in radio history as well. There are other filmed versions. And it always seems to arise as a kind of unclear metaphor for something that's going on at the time of its deployment, right? We'll talk more about that at the end. They eventually realize, all right, Tom Cruise says, I can't handle these kids. I'm just going to take them to the mom in Boston. Sensible choice.
Yeah.
But
even as the apocalypse dawns on him,
he's like, I don't want to do this.
How do I get rid of these fucking kids?
Yeah, this is not what I signed up for. We divorced. I said partial custody. My days are over.
This is not my day. This is not my day.
Eventually, they get to this ferry crossing near the Hudson, I guess. I don't.
Right. Where the son starts to have his crisis of conscience.
The son really wants to just. The son hates the aliens. He wants to run off and fight them.
Yeah. He
Yes,
wants to sign up. He wants to serve.
right. Which seems like what? Why?
Well,
Like,
again, I think it's the 9/11 parallel, right?
yep. Good. And also, we see missing posters everywhere from
Mm-hmm.
people who've been, again, September 11th, right? And as they reach this ferry, a riotous gang steals their car from them. And that seems bad. It's like, well, it wasn't their car to begin with. So now they've lost it. And then we see a gunfight break out over who gets to have the car. As they're finally able to get on, they run into one of his friends from the neighborhood. She's like, oh, you're here. They got on the ferry boat. She does not.
No.
There's a great sort of separated at the border fall of Berlin Wall, closing of Berlin Wall. I don't know. It's supposed to look something. What? Unclear. But of course, who shows up? Our old friends, the tripods. A new bunch of tripods appear. They attack the ferry. The ferry gets tipped over. Many die. Many are trapped in cars. Tom Cruise and family escape to a secluded region where they're able to watch the town they were just in get just utterly obliterated by these tripods, shooting lasers, shooting fire. It's brutal. It's the brutality. And
there's no real attempt ever to piece together why any of this is transpiring, right?
no, I think we're just understand that it's chaos, that, the sort of
they've risen, right? They've
we're
woken
back,
up.
and they've taken us immediately to the Hobbesian state of the war of all against all, right? People are just, no one's working together. People are panicking. That's what they stole their van. Eventually, they get across the river and they come to a place where we meet an army that is gathering to fight the tripods. And this is when Robbie, the son, runs off to join the, he's trying to convince Robbie to stay, but these other people are convincing the little girl to go with them as they flee the So he's kind of has a Sophie's choice moment where I can let Robbie go off, join the military, or I can save my daughter, who these people are trying to kidnap.
But it's also portrayed as like finally doing something for his kid. Finally, like
he actually cares a little bit.
Yeah, I care a little bit, and I realize this is important to you, even though we've done nothing to show why this was actually important to the kid.
No, nothing.
Other than it was probably just more annoying to film with the two of them.
So Robbie runs off with the army, but very quickly the army seems to just be utterly obliterated. Their weapons are useless against the tripods.
By the tripod militarized aliens? They lost out? Yeah. This ragtag group of ne'er-do-wells couldn't bring them down? Like, what?
So they find sanctuary with this character, Harlan Ogilvy, played by very tall Tim Robbins. Yeah. And again, like, I almost felt like he's just in this because at some point they're like, well, we've got to have another character in this at some point.
in another name.
Tim Robbins is available. He's right. Now there is in the novel a character who's approximately like this. He's a priest who goes insane when faced with the attack of the tripods. They're in his basement for what feels like the majority of the film kind of takes place.
It goes on for so long.
And I really had that thing where it's not that long of a film either. It's like
it's 2 hours.
55. It's not even like, it's not like it's a 2.5, 3 hour movie.
It felt like it.
It felt so interminable.
Yeah.
This guy's delusional. He says to Ray, the Cruise character, we're the resistance, Ray. We're going to fight them. We're going to show, and it's just like very quickly Ray's like, oh no, I'm trapped with a madman. He's making noises. We see some of the aliens out of their tripods skulking through this basement.
Just hanging out for some reason.
They're very curious about this utterly.
They're so curious about this one area.
Cellar.
Right. Where like this guy, I guess, I don't know, because all they'd have to do is leave these completely overmatched people alone. Like they could be no threat. The guy has like one gun.
Yeah.
Right.
They have tripod killing machines everywhere. And it's pretty. I don't get this at all. It goes on forever. There's a scene where they hide behind a mirror and the alien is looking in the mirror and it's like, oh, the narcissistic alien is so engrossed by its own. I don't know. I'm drawing straw. I'm coming up empty here. Like there's just nothing.
Well, it's just because there's nothing like there's no reason for any of the section in the bunker to really happen, right? It's as though they got to that point and realized they didn't have a story. And so they were like, what if we get an eccentric guy to be some sort of foil and obstacle, you know?
Yep.
It doesn't do anything, it doesn't explain anything, and
As he
his
starts screaming,
ending.
of course, Tom Cruise realizes he's going to have to make the hard choice of
Right.
beating him to death with his own
That's right.
with his bare hand.
And he has this thing throughout the movie of trying to shield his daughter Dakota Fanning
He puts a little
from,
blindfold over her
yeah,
eyes.
like don't look, don't look. It
Don't
happens a few
listen as
different
I
times.
go and beat the nice man to death.
That's right. And it's just sort of like how
And
like
is that
how,
a
like,
metaphor for like torture? Like we've got to do the
I
hard,
don't know.
right?
I don't
Like, but it doesn't make
I don't
sense.
really
It's
know.
not the
It doesn't
enemy
make
you're
sense.
torturing. It's the
Right.
innocent fellow victim that you must torture.
Yes. Right. And like that's the thing is that he doesn't become a good parent,
No,
right?
no.
Which in a sense, in a different world, could be an interesting choice, sort of counter to the genre and the way it typically unfolds. But he doesn't he doesn't really have particular like I mean, obviously he helps solve the problem and get them out and all of that. But like
Oh, right.
it doesn't it you know, as we'll talk about with the ending, like it's all just that at the end of the day, he's just like getting his daughter back to the parent she actually loves.
Yep, yep.
Right.
And so they kill Harlan, and they're sleeping in the basement, but they're captured. The
Mm-hmm.
daughter wakes up. She runs away. She's they're both caught in a net. Luckily, he finds a bandolier of grenades
Yep.
that he is.
Here they are. Yeah.
Oh, that's right where I left them.
Oh, grenades. Yeah, they're usually around.
Manages to slip them into the mouth of the tripod and
Mm-hmm.
blow it up
Mm-hmm.
and rescue the group of people in the weird tripod net. And that's kind of the climax of the film, basically.
Yeah.
After which they walk to Boston.
Yeah, they just kind of stroll.
You know, the geography of this also makes no sense. So they've crossed the Hudson River.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So they're
Still a tick from Boston.
yeah, they're nearing Great Barrington. Like, this is not this is like 100-mile walk that they managed to do.
They don't look in particularly bad shape either when they show up.
Their shoes
In
are
fact, she's so full of energy, she goes sprinting towards the mom. Right?
yep. And Miracle
who, by the way, is there, and there's
is fine, and her parents are fine, and her husband is fine, and Robbie is there and is fine. Never explained. Oh, you didn't die in that massacre?
Yeah, how the kid just tried to fight a war which failed, and then just sort of jogged to Boston to wait for his dad.
To Boston by a day somehow.
Right.
No, doesn't make any sense. Yeah, so bad movie, doesn't even look good.
Well, but why don't we just talk a bit about how it ends and what the explanation is for why the tripods are no longer a threat.
And this is what happens in the novel and in all earlier versions of this too. The aliens, we see them in Boston before the reunion. Their tripod is it looks drunk. It's like staggering about. They're talking to some military guys. They're like, oh, I don't know, that they're losing control of them or whatever. Like, not Boston. This was all shot in Brooklyn, by the way, which I think is somehow perfect. Like, like their house is clearly like a Brooklyn brownstone. Having lived in both places, it's anyway. Never mind. Never mind. It's our germs. They're killed by human germs.
It is our germs.
We've hard scrabble.
These tripods have spent all of this time, I guess, watching us, right? Plotting.
They have buried weapons underneath our surface for possibly hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Right.
But
couldn't handle a common cold.
Yeah, but also just like don't know about the germ theory of disease or like.
Yeah, no clue. No clue.
Yeah. All right. But never mind also that this doesn't make any sense. Oh, yeah. I've written what has made the aliens die? Human disease. Our filth has saved us. It doesn't make any sense because of convergent evolution, right? Like the reason disease knows how to kill us is because it's evolved around us and we've evolved defenses, right? That there's like a complementary symbiotic relationship between human beings and the diseases that affect us, which is why, like, if an alien disease landed from a meteor or something, as often happens in films we may at some point cover in the future, it doesn't make any sense because that alien, the proteins in that alien disease would not be adapted specifically to attack our immune systems because they have no exposure to us.
Right. And yet they were perfectly adapted to obliterate this alien species.
Right. Which as I said, just doesn't make sense. Like,
and it's like, I guess they should have just kept sitting there watching and controlling us. Like what? It's so fucking weird.
Yeah. It doesn't make any sense.
800 million.
This is like big thing with these alien, movies. Like Signs famously came out a little bit before this, right? I think early 2000s. The aliens are weak to water, right? You splash, they're the Wicked Witch of the West syndrome, right? You splash water on them, they're dead. Again, what's the most abundant thing on this planet? Remind me, no, water. So these aliens, in scouting this out, we're like, well, we should go there because we know we're not weak to that.
Right.
Most common on that.
What's all that stuff surrounding the land? There's no time. There's no time. Don't worry about that. We'll figure that out.
Just get in the transporter, goddammit.
Yeah.
And then Independence Day, similar, like Hand of God,
the computer virus.
Yeah, just you know what? The Stuxnet virus. That's going to take them or whatever, And lo and behold, the aliens' destruction ship just crashes to the ground, and it's our new Independence Day, says Bill Pullman. So just to go into the history of the War of the Worlds a little bit before we wrap this up, like, original novel came out in 1898. Part of H.G. Wells' like great run of Time Machine, Journey to the Center of the Earth, a real like classic sci-fi pioneer, interesting guy, socialist, right? Someone with very progressive values, a socialist futurist, which I think is that's possible. Whereas today I think we only get like libertarian nightmare futurists who are like,
Ayn Rand acolytes who take it to outer space.
Just like the worst thing imaginable. In the original book, he doesn't have any kids. He has a wife, but he's separated from her physically, and they reunite at the end. He meets a character similar to the Tim Robbins character who goes mad in a basement after the Martians. Oh, one other thing we didn't mention, that the humans were being used as a kind of fertilizer for this like insidious red plant that was spreading everywhere. Not explained by the film at all, but that's also a feature in the original novel. They're basically using human blood to like, not even to eat, just to like, to enrich the soil for their red alien weed or what have you. I just have a quick sort of quote from the novel, from the end of the novel I like to read. And this is in the aftermath. The tripods are dead, but the aliens are dead, but their tripods are littered everywhere. And the original novel is set in London, of course. He says, the broadening of men's views that has resulted can scarcely be exaggerated. Before the cylinder fell, there was a general persuasion that through all the deep of space, no life existed beyond the petty surface of our minute sphere. Now we see further. If the Martians can reach Venus, there is no reason to suppose that the thing is impossible for men. And when the slow cooling of the sun makes this Earth uninhabitable, so global cooling was the fear at this time, which I think is as at last it must do. It may be that the thread of life that has begun here will have streamed out and caught our sister planet within its toils. So it's like this weird, like the Martians have taught us to like look beyond.
Did you get that from the movie?
No, that was not the takeaway I got. Another thing is, despite the utterly
really honored the source material.
Yeah. Despite the nonsensical evolution stuff with the virus, Wells was a big Darwin acolyte. He was like a big early Darwin apologist. and he was obsessed with not Darwin's phrase, but this survival of the fittest idea. That this like
Mhm.
contest between man and Martian was like a social Darwinist contest in his
Okay.
mind. And there's also this thing that, like in the novel, the Martians are too rational, too emotionless. They don't have the human capacities for hope and decency,
Mm.
which, as we know from being alive, decency is really the thing we have that the Martians lack.
Yeah.
And there's also an aspect of the novel that's a critical of imperialism, which I think is cool. It's like, oh, London, you like conquering India, you like conquering, the Caribbean, all these places. Oh, how's it feel when a
Yeah.
little,
How's it feel now?
which I think that's kind of metal. That's cool. Now the other
Yeah.
famous,
Also didn't really pick that up in the film.
no,
But I
that's
guess they weren't gonna do that if they were paying tribute to 9/11.
no, certainly. Um, the other famous War of the Worlds is 1938 War of the Worlds broadcast on
Of course.
the radio play, which broadcast on October 30th, 1938. It was a Halloween broadcast,
Hmm.
and yet is presented often in nostalgic accounts looking back as if this set off a panic. This was like a Americans throughout the streets. That didn't happen, right? I mean, four times within the broadcast,
This is Orson Welles we're
the
talking
Orson
about now.
Welles broadcast, the radio play. It was announced it was fictional four times within the broadcast. There were like ad breaks, And now back to our fictional play about the War of the Worlds of H.G. Wells.
Jimmy's razors,
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Have you heard of Coca-Cola? Right. One theory that I've read that I think is interesting is that the panic narrative about this was actually really pushed heavily the next day by newspapers. Now,
You
granted,
mean that regular people were panicking as a result of
that
the
people were
broadcast?
driven to panic in the streets, and that newspapers were in intense rivalry with the then nascent form of radio broadcast. They didn't like it. They're like, this is a
Oh.
rival. So we got to show everyone why this is bad because it's dangerous. We don't cause panics. We fact check. A newspaper has never lied.
It's like the old legacy media versus X battle that is
Absolutely.
currently
It's
raging.
100% the same thing we've seen over and over again
Yeah.
as every new media form emerges. And there's almost no evidence for widespread panic. There were, some people who thought it was real, but there, as we know from being alive,
There are some people who will think pretty much anything.
everyone thinks everything is real now, right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, RFK says that the power line is causing the COVID to get struck. It's just like, okay, whatever. But I think it's interesting that timing is kind of in between the sort of the first Red Scare, the rise of the Soviet Union, the beginning of the Stalin era, and of course, 1938, just before World War II, right? So
right.
This is a material. That
old chestnut.
Oh yeah, that incident. The it feels like it crops up. People turn to this material in times of crisis, like, oh, 9/11. Well, you know what we got to do. I do. War of the Worlds remake.
War of the Worlds.
Like as if this is the ultimate commentary. But I feel like, barring the original novel, I think is interesting, but this other stuff, it just doesn't really cohere in a way that I find satisfying at all.
No. I mean, it was pretty well unbearable to get through, right? I mean, like in that it was very clear from very early on that this was going to be terrible.
Yeah.
Right? Like the first 20 minutes, there was no hope for this to turn into a good movie. And then somehow it got even worse than that. Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Especially as you already referenced the bunker sequence that felt like it took 90 minutes itself.
I felt like I lost a year of my life watching that, even though it was.
Yeah. I think it's yet another example of, taking some material that, just like what you just talked about and the quote you just read, that ostensibly would have something intriguing to say about our current condition or other moments in modern history, which is why it gets trotted out. And yet it just seems like we're more interested in failing that material than engaging with it.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, there's nothing really here for me.
No. I will never watch it again.
I really hope not. I mean, if I'm chained up by an evil dentist who's
or a tripod,
or one of the tripods, yeah. I mean, the tripods at least are kind of cool. At least they're free flying saucer.
Sure.
Like that's what we thought aliens were before the whole saucer.
They also don't really do anything interesting themselves.
No, they're pretty. They're pretty. They shoot lasers and they have like metal octopus limbs.
Right. But we're unprepared for the flu.
Well, that's an appropriate segue to what we'll be covering next week, Michael.
Yeah. We're going to take a look at bird flu. Have you ever heard of it? And I think for now, because it appears to be in its nascent stages and no one knows which way it'll go.
And hopefully it won't go anywhere that causes anything terrible. But
no, you mean like an 18-month lockdown? Sure. But no. I think we're gonna look a little bit at bird flu as a phenomenon in various online rabbit holes and communities, ranging from conspiracy theorists through to long COVID community, like people who are still masking, etc. And the way that and eventually we'll also talk a little bit about COVID at some point. But for now, I think what we're interested in is this fear of the next thing. Yep. Right? We've been through COVID. Some people are convinced that not only will this be COVID redux, it in fact will be way worse, which typically is the way this sort of apocalyptic thinking builds on itself. It wouldn't even be just enough to be as nightmarish as COVID. But trust me, you ain't seen nothing yet. So, and we're also going to look at the way, similar to things that we've done with some of our new stuff, just the way that the mainstream media is looking at it versus a variety of other sources, both, less substantial media and online sources. And then obviously individual aggregate accounts that places like Outbreak Updates that are filling me with God's fear right now.
Your number one resources for all things.
My algorithm
you would get sports news from Outbreak Updates.
Since we decided to do that, since we talked about this last week that we were going to cover this, my algorithm has been just when I thought like constantly being inundated with Elon Musk tweets like yes and cool.
Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water. Now,
yeah, that's right. So yeah, we'll be looking at that, and then going forward, eventually we will talk a bit about the current state of affairs regarding COVID as well.
Yep, and I'm looking forward to that. In the meantime, if you like the pod, feel free to follow us on Instagram at the End of the World WMS, or to subscribe to the pod on the podcatcher of your choice. Tell a friend about the wonderful work we are doing here at the End of the World with Michael and Stu. And until then, this has been the End of the World with Michael and Stu.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Stu, and we'll talk to you real soon.